All right, next up I'd like to welcome Errol Lawrence up to the stage to give a talk on geology and wellfields and what data do we need to make ISR a success in New Mexico.
Thank you, Daria. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. My name is Errol Lawrence. I am a hydrogeologist and a groundwater modeler. I work with engineering analytics. I've been doing groundwater models for the uranium industry since about 1995. And so it's been a real pleasure to kind of get together and reconnect with a lot of fellow colleagues that I've gotten to know through the years, and also to meet a lot of the new faces that are coming into the industry. So that's always exciting. Not sure. There we go. So what I want to talk to you about today is groundwater modeling to support uranium ISR projects. Uranium mining is often conducted using ISR methods, so that's in-situ recovery. In-situ recovery involves tens to hundreds of wells configured in an array to allow the injection of fluids to solubilize the uranium and then extract it out in production wells. I know we've kind of covered some of this stuff in a lot of detail over the last couple of days, but just kind of a quick refresher. There are a lot of key concepts related to the hydraulic control of fluids in ISR well fields that are important to understand in order to successfully use that method to recover uranium resources. Groundwater modeling happens to be a great tool to try and evaluate wellfield hydraulics. It can be used to basically maximize or enhance production, and it can also be used to minimize environmental impacts. And the reason that the modeling is really useful for that is most of the things that I'm going to talk about happen underground. So we don't really get a good visual of what's happening when we talk about things like wellfield flare and sweep efficiency and even drawdown. You know, we can measure things at discrete points, but it's hard to visualize that because we can't actually see it. Well, when we use models, we can usually take the output from models and create some nice graphics so that at least we get a visual idea of what is going on, and it makes it a little bit clearer to us, you know, a little easier to understand. Just to rehash, ISR, there are several requirements for ISR to be a viable method for recovering uranium. What I have up on here, up on the left-hand side of the slide is just a plan view of a well field. We've got an array of injection and extraction wells, and then surrounding the well field is a monitoring ring. And then the block diagram shows sort of a typical circuit where you have injection of water that's been fortified with an oxidizer into the injection wells. It dissolves off the uranium. You pull it out through the production wells, also called extraction wells or recovery wells, same term. And then run it through a processing plant, pull the uranium out, refortify that water, and then re-inject it. So it's somewhat of it's not a fully closed loop, but most of the water is basically recycled. So there's not a lot of consumptive use of water during the actual mining phases of ISR. The key things that we have to have, first of all, the ore has to be amenable to leaching, obviously. The media, the host rock media, has to have some permeability so we can push and pull fluids through that pretty effectively. We have to have enough hydraulic head, or the water level has to be high enough so that when we start pumping, we're not just going to dewater the ore body that we've been going all this trouble to liberate this uranium and get it out of the ground. We also, at least in the United States, you usually have to have some type of overlying and underlying confinement, so some low permeability units that containerize our production fluids and keep them from going places we don't want them to go. One other aspect, I know Craig in the panel yesterday said, that ISR wasn't really affected so much by depth. The process is not affected by depth, but one thing is, depending on the depth of the ore body, in other words, if it was 8,000 feet down, you're not going to use ISR methodology because the wells are going to be just too expensive. When I first started in this industry, it seemed like most of the ISR was 300 to 500 feet deep. That's been getting deeper all the time, and as well as drilling technology advances, some of those earlier, I won't say limitations, but cost and technical restrictions are less so. All right, there's a number of very important concepts. So keep in mind that ISR is fundamentally based on the hydraulic control of fluids in the subsurface. And so there's a lot of very important concepts related to wellfield hydraulics that I'm going to talk about. And all of these, I'm going to give you quick modeling examples, except for the last one because I'm going to be out of time by then. To show how we can use models to first enhance our understanding and also improve our design of our ISR process and well fields based on, at least initially, on the modeling information. I'm going to talk about well pattern design and selection, drawdown impacts, both local on a well specific and well field size and even outside of the well field. Sweep efficiency, are we putting the fluids where we want them so that they're actually contacting the ore and doing the job that we want to happen. Well field flare, are we pushing things in areas where we don't want it to go and we don't need it to go? So we want to understand that a little bit. Groundwater monitoring is a fundamental, and very important concept in ISR. You saw some of the discussions earlier. Everything is very heavily monitored, so we can use modeling to help determine what our well spacings are for monitoring. Where should we put our monitoring points? How frequently should we monitor them? So things like that. Aquifer restoration, I'm not going to talk about that. It'd be another whole field, but certainly modeling can help us in that aspect of the ISR process. So well pattern types and considerations for selecting them. In the upper right-hand corner, I have a typical 5-spot well field, and that entails you've got 4 injection wells surrounding a single production well. And if the ore body is aerially extensive, you can repeat that pattern, and then you get the benefit where now your injectors can actually feed 4 different producing wells. So it becomes good in terms of efficiency of that well field. The 7-spot pattern shown right below that. In this case, we have 6 injection wells surrounding 1 extraction well, and again, that's a repeatable pattern that you can, if you have a large area to cover, you get the benefit of that. If you had an elongate, sinuous ore body, you might consider using a line drive, which I'm showing on the bottom, where you have a row of production wells and then a row of injection wells on either side. You can have staggered line drives, you can have reverse line drives, so there's a lot of, an infinite number of combinations we can come up with, but these are some of the most common. So the considerations of, how do you decide which type of pattern is best for this particular ore body or the project? You want to look at the shape and size of the ore body. You want to have an understanding of what type of extraction and injection rates you need to apply to this ore body in order to economically extract the uranium. And so that may govern something with your well spacing and the number of wells you have in your patterns. You want to know, what the maximum drawdown or rise is going to be at your projected rates of pumping. Sweep efficiency, each one of these patterns has a little different sweep efficiency to it. So you might want to model, just do test models and see how these different things work out, under different spacings, different pumping rates. So again, modeling can help. It'd be nice if you had enough money, you can go out and do field experiments on every single one of these different systems and try and optimize your well field that way, but that's usually not very practical. So the modeling helps you quickly, you can compare a lot of these variables and see what looks like it works best for the scenario or the site conditions that you have. This is just a simulated potentiometric surface, so the water level surface in an ore zone aquifer that's being mined or simulated as being mined using a series of 5-spot patterns. And you can see these troughs and the peaks, and the peaks represent the recharge amount that occurs over an injection well. And the troughs represent the drawdown cone that you would see at an extraction well. And the amplitude of the peaks and the troughs is a function of the intrinsic properties of the aquifer, the extraction and the injection rates that we're imposing on the system, and also the well spacing and the type of pattern, but in this case I told you it was a 5-spot. And so you get well interference going on, so all these things, you can do analytical solutions and calculate what this ought to look like, but once you start getting into tens to hundreds of wells, that becomes extremely cumbersome, and numerical models can handle this type of a scenario very, very easily. ISR well fields operate under a net bleed, and by that I mean that more water is extracted than is injected during the ISR operations. What this does, and the bleed is not huge. Typically, you're looking at something like 0.5%, maybe up to 2% more extraction than injection. But that is enough to create a drawdown cone in the vicinity of the well field, and this has the benefit of keeping all your production fluid sort of sucked into the well field area so that you're not losing control. You don't have any kind of uncontrolled releases, as it were. One of the things that we look at, though, is if you're pumping too hard and create excessive drawdown, you may impact water rights from an adjacent landowner. So, modeling can help us predict what that drawdown is going to be at our projected rates. In this particular modeling example, there were 2 well fields, you can see in the dark area, that were operating concurrently. So the client wanted to know what's the drawdown impact going to be. And I know you probably can't read the numbers on there, but the maximum drawdown that occurs outside that blue outline, right in the very corner, is about 5 feet of head loss. And in Wyoming, that's usually considered, that's a wash. It's like nobody's going to get too excited about that. So it's a fairly negligible impact. This is one of my favorite topics, just maybe because it's pretty poorly understood, I think, even within the industry sometimes, is sweep efficiency. And sweep efficiency really is just the proportion of an area to be swept or mined that is contacted by injectate and then recovered at the extraction well over the whole, whole area of interest. And we talk about it in terms of pore volumes. And a pore volume is nothing more than the volume of groundwater within some defined area. And that could be in a well pattern, it could be in a well field, it could be in a permit area, although that's less commonly used in that context. We measure it by multiplying the area of the ore body, by the thickness of the ore body, by the porosity of that unit. And it's scale dependent. As I said, it can relate to a lot of different patterns or items or things. I have an example calculation up there. If I did my conversions right, if you had a 100-foot by 100-foot well pattern, you'd have about 280,000 gallons if it was a 15-foot thick unit, 15% porosity. So just kind of keep that in mind. So that would be one pore volume. So again, our sweep efficiency is the injectate contacted and recovered portion of that pore volume divided by the full pore volume. And this is a modeling example, so you at least get a visual of it. What I'm simulating here is a 5-spot pattern. So I've got 4 injection wells surrounding a single extraction well. This is a homogeneous aquifer, which means the properties are the same, basically laterally, there's no changes in permeability really. The pumping rate that's applied to the extraction well is equivalent to the removal of 1 pore volume every 15 days. And so in this model, I'm showing you snapshots of 5, 10, and 15 days. The colored lines indicate the flow lines coming out of the injection wells. And so if you see on the far left, after 5 days, you can see that none of the injectate has reached the extraction well yet. By the time we get to 10 days, we have breakthrough, we have first arrival. Some of that injectate has finally gotten over to the extraction well, is being pulled out. At the end of 15 days, I kind of highlighted the gray area. That is the area within this well pattern, within our PV, our pore volume, that has contacted the aquifer with injectate and then been extracted. Well, you can see, so now we've taken out 1 pore volume, it's been 15 days, and yet a good portion of that area hasn't even been contacted by the injectate yet. Some of it has been contacted, but it hasn't made it to the extraction well yet. Obviously, if I keep running the simulation over time, those traces that you see that are outside the gray area, eventually they're going to get pulled into the extraction well and sort of, will recover the uranium in them. But what this points out is how disproportionate this sweep efficiency can be. Because by the time we've pulled out 30 or 40 pore volumes, most of the water is coming on these fast, short groundwater travel paths, the more direct ones, inside that gray envelope. The ones outside are taking a lot longer to get there, so by the time I pulled out 30 pore volumes, I've only contacted those maybe 4 or 5 equivalent times. So it's a real disproportion. It's not just emptying the box. So that's something I think that some people misunderstand when they talk about sweep efficiency. This is wellfield flare. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. Basically, this is anything that gets outside of our wellfield. We're going to consider that flare. So depending on how we placed our outer injectors, if they're right at the very edge of our ore zone, well, then a lot of our flare is going out into areas that it's probably not doing us much good. There's no ore out there. Maybe we pull those injectors in a little bit so that that flare is getting some of the ore or making contact with it. But we want to minimize the amount of flare because if we're not utilizing that the fluids that our production fluids to recover ore, then we're just wasting that resource. Groundwater monitoring, as again it's been said a number of times, very important part of an ISR project. We can use modeling to determine how far out our wellfield ring should be and what the spacing between those individual monitoring wells on that ring should be so that we can detect an excursion or an uncontrolled release. We can use the modeling to show that if we do detect an excursion, can we pull it back by changing up the hydraulics, the pumping within our wellfield. So it can be really valuable for that. And so to summarize, successful application of ISR is strongly dependent on the hydraulic control of our production fluids. And because of the large number of wells, groundwater modeling provides us the best predictor of the wellfield behavior while we're in ISR operations. And so the modeling is a valuable tool, and it can help us increase our productivity, and it can definitely help us to minimize any potential environmental impacts. And with that, I am going to shut up because it's getting late in the day. I'm sure everybody's ready to get out of here. We're getting close. I don't know if I have time for questions or not.
So I see you're modeling with a lot of the drills that are vertical, but I'm hearing some of the new technology that want to start making them horizontal. Is there models that, are they just going to use the same analysis, or is there a different type of?
The models are actually three-dimensional, at least these ones that I have, where I'm looking at both vertical and horizontal extent of hydraulic response. So these are not solute transport models. They're not looking at chemicals, how they're moving, but it's the flow paths are definitely, and we can do solute transport modeling also, but it is three-dimensional. So yes, it does account for both vertical and lateral.
Okay.
Maybe you just want to clarify, it's essentially just like the single line drive shows this one horizontal wall.
Yeah. That sweep efficiency and the flare slide, I can go back very easily. Probably not. Those are showing things in plan view, but there is a vertical component to it. It gets more complex. And obviously the examples I'm giving you are really simple systems. A lot of the models I build have much more complexity in them, so things are not quite as clear-cut and rosy looking as some of these diagrams that I've shown. All right, thank you.
All right, and next up, we're going to welcome Adelya to the stage, who's going to be covering some advances in technology that are relevant to uranium extraction.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I know all of you are already tired. I'll try to keep my presentation very short. So Dr. Ali Jafri is supposed to give a talk today, but unfortunately he got sick. And Janet kindly allowed me to fill the empty spot. And I will share a little bit more about seismic application in mineral exploration. And it's very unique and innovative approach to exploration, and I will explain why I'm sharing it today. Okay, so because the whole team came from oil and gas industry, and in oil and gas, we use seismic a lot. And our team consists of drilling engineers, AI engineers, and geoscientists. And we've been looking for oil and gas deposits around the world. I work in South Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe. And at some point, I realized that I don't want to work in oil and gas industry anymore, and I want to start looking in mining, something in mining industry, and try to use seismic. And seismic is an amazing tool. And in oil and gas, it's used widely because all of the deposits, they're extremely deep. And in order to find oil and gas, you need to understand subsurface better. You basically, how seismic works is like an MRI for Earth. You need to understand exactly where you need to drill. The current state of art in mining that people just trying to find deposits by drilling. And we believe that we need to understand subsurface better, have a geological hypothesis before drilling wells. And seismic is perfect fit for it. It's not only that it has a great resolution, but also it gives so much more information about the source of the mineralization, the faults, which is pathway for transport, and also the trap. And most of the shallow deposits, they have been depleted already, and the trend that we are going deeper. And in order to go deeper, we need to have better resolution and have better understanding of what's going on below our feet. And for those who don't know how the uranium mineralization formed, it basically sits in fluvial channels. It's very porous sandstones that have been formed 20, 40 million years ago by the rivers. And rivers, or paleofluvial channels, they're the most laterally extensive geological features. So in order to understand how they look like, we need to use seismic. And I will show you a couple of examples. We are very early startup. We started earlier last year, but we have some use cases, so I will be gladly share it with you. That's one of the examples in Wyoming. It's a Nichols Ranch field, and they have drilled around 4,000 to 5,000 wells. And if they would use seismic, they could reduce the number of drill holes by 1,000 or maybe more. And you could save much more money by applying seismic, understand where exactly these paleo rivers flow. Another example is in Australia, and on the left you can see how the raw seismic looks like. When you look at it, you will not see anything. You need to apply advanced mathematical formulas and play with different attributes. In this case, I used spectral decomposition. It's a range of frequency to highlight and see the geological features better. And in the middle, you will see there are rivers. And also, luckily, we had some gamma ray, some wells with gamma ray spikes that perfectly coincides with fluvial channels. And down the road, we are also planning to do more R&D work to try to understand where exactly mineralization zones are. And because we're a tech company, we are also using some innovative agentic AI stuff to make our work fast and efficient and do interpretation within a couple of days instead of a couple of months. And on the right, you can see the blending of different frequencies to find the perfect combination to highlight fluvial channels. And seismic useful is not only for mineral exploration, but also for ISR. And as you already know, that for ISR, it's extremely important to have continuity of the layers, and especially the clay stones above and below sandstones, that we need to have a great buffer. So seismic also allows to highlight that. And another use case for ISR is 4D seismic, is basically time-lapse. We can track how fluid moving throughout the time, and we just can track the plume, the water flow within time. There is an example for CO2 injection that has been done in the Sliper, and the data was taken from Equinor. It's publicly available. And that's it from my side. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or catch me after the conference. Thank you.